Hello there, welcome back to the PPM Historian. I know that in the last episode I said that this episode was going to be about a coronation, but it's actually not, it's about something different. But one later down the line will be about a coronation. I just got my words mixed up because I'm a simpleton. So today we're going to talk about Florence Nightingale, who could be considered to be the ideal project manager. This year we celebrate the bicentenary of Florence Nightingale's birth. She was born in 1820, obviously, since that's 100 years from this year, 2020, count back 100, not 200 years. Bicentenary means 200 years ago. She was born 200 years ago, not 100. That would be centenary, I think. Regardless, you'll know her as the Lady with the Lamp, or more importantly, as the founder of modern nursing. Now, we're of the belief that one of the reasons she excelled so much in her profession was because, in a way, she's a great project manager. But first, let's cover a quick summary of who she was. Florence was born into a wealthy family, and uncommonly for girls of that generation, she was well educated. And as a young woman, she decided that she wanted to devote her life in the service of others, as that was God's plan for her. Admirable for a young woman to decide. As a young man, I didn't decide that I wanted to live my life in service of others. I decided I wanted to do this. Her family, however, didn't agree with me that it was a very admirable thing to do. Instead, they were diametrically opposed to her doing this. At the time, nurses didn't really have a good reputation, and it wasn't appropriate for somebody of her rank to go into that profession. Her mother and sister were particularly distressed at her decision, but Florence went ahead anyway and just got on with it. Because that's what heroes do, as the great Thor said. What many don't know is Florence was also trained as a statistician. She loved to read data and found them more interesting than novels. Now, while I maintain that she is an icon and a hero and should be revered among not just the British public, but the world's public, that's strange. I'm not on board with the data reading thing. I think it's just an odd way to spend your time. But what do I know? I'm not the founder of anything. To her, she considered statistics God's work. She was the first woman ever admitted as a fellow to the Royal Statistical Society. And she was also a pioneer in data visualization, which is something that's increasingly relevant today. She was kind of an early adopter of infographics and used graphical representations of data to kind of spice it up. Now we know a little bit about Florence Nightingale, and I do mean a little bit. Let's move on to talking about how she would have been a great project manager. People management. Florence Nightingale definitely had people management skills. You might know that she got famous due to her role in the Crimean War. In October 1854, she made her way to Scutari, which is modern-day Istanbul, together with 38 volunteer nurses. An army of nurses. Nurse army. The Nightingale army. It's got a ring to it. Now, the Scutari barracks had been converted into a British military hospital, but the facility couldn't cope with the number of wounded soldiers that were being sent there. There were thousands. And when Florence arrived, the first thing she noticed is that the conditions were dreadful. The place was full of vermin, filth, and more soldiers were dying from infections than they were from their actual wounds. But she immediately began trying to rectify the situation, and this is where her people management skills became crucial, especially because initially the doctors and officers didn't want the nurses' help. All they were allowed to do was clean the ward. But soon, using her ultra-powerful soft skills, Florence was able to get them on her side and keep them there. Business change. As Florence essentially founded the modern nursing profession, I'd say that it's a safe bet to say she has the skills to drive change. And in 1859, she wrote the famous Notes on Nursing, which is still considered a classic introduction to nursing even to this day. And the following year, she set up a nursing training school at St Thomas's Hospital in London, which, as a side note, my wife worked at for quite a long time. She's a big fan of Florence Nightingale. She's got a big portrait above the bed. That's not true, but she does like her. Throughout her life, and despite poor health, she never stopped campaigning to raise extra funds. And her clever use of data also allowed her to achieve buy-in from politicians, which is the executive in this scenario, because they could no longer basically say that they didn't understand the data, because it was drawn out for them all nice and pretty for them to comprehend. So yes, Florence definitely had the skills to drive business change. Communication skills. Florence became friends with Sidney Herbert, who eventually became Secretary of War during the Crimean War, and she even became a clear advisor to him, which is a clear indication of her above average communication skills. That's not the kind of role that you excel at without having a certain degree of communicative ability. She also managed her nurses, became a lobbyist, and published over 200 books, leaflets, and pamphlets. So it's safe to assume that not only because of the volume of her publications, but also the longevity of them, that she had some fairly sound communication skills. Time management. By the end of the Crimean War, the hospitals in Scutari had been completely overhauled by Florence Nightingale. They were no longer a reminder of the hellish war for which they were created. Instead, they had been transformed into highly efficient, highly organised and smooth-running facilities, which is exactly what you want from a hospital. The death rate in that hospital was reduced from 42 to 2%, and many people said this was mainly down to Florence's work. So evidently, time management would have been in Florence Nightingale's toolbox. or nurse box. Oh, they still use tools. It's a toolbox. Although if a nurse approached me with a toolbox, I'm running. And if you speak to a nurse today, time management is always on their agenda. That's why they wear the little upside down watch. Resilience. All her life, Florence Nightingale displayed resilience. We've already covered that back at the beginning when we talked about her parents and her sister not wanting her to become a nurse. She went and did it anyway. And when she had to get the doctors and officers from Scutari on board. But even as a young woman, she refused to get married and opposed that standard social norm in order to pursue something greater. She followed the call to help the sick and the deprived, and in doing so, not only put herself in danger, but also risked being shunned by her family. Following her work in the Crimean War, she suffered from health issues for the rest of her life. Even during those times where she was bedbound with illness, she still managed to continue her work. And even in the last few years of her life, when her work slowed down dramatically, it was only because of blindness, and even then she never stopped. So if you're looking for the definition of resilience, you need to look no further than Florence Nightingale's life. Emotional intelligence. Florence was aware of the impact of toxic cultures even then, and she began to write to her nurses about it. And she explained to them that gossiping, bad temper, bad thoughts, jealousy and complaining all created a negative atmosphere. And she also knew how important empathy was when she was looking after patients. For instance, she established a patient library in the Scutari hospital, which obviously yielded positive results and is a great example of her high degree of emotional intelligence. Now, I'm not saying that Florence Nightingale was an angel or that she was perfect. I do understand that there are some stories out there and some things out there that don't necessarily cast her in the best light, but I do think she's a great example of a project manager. And a fun fact to send us off into the beyond, and before you go clicking on lots of other videos, she actually got her Barbie made this year, which I'm very torn about how I feel. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Let's say it is. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the Axelos YouTube channel. We really enjoy making these videos, and we'll have lots more next year, including lots of live streams that you can come and attend. So keep an eye out for those. I'll see you next time.